Welcome to The State of Us. Real people with honest opinions and the future of responsible media. Here's your host, Justin T. Weller.
2 years ago, China turned the American recycling industry on its head when it stopped accepting millions of tons of its scrap materials. Since then, state lawmakers and departments have been forced to re-examine a system long dependent on sending plastic bottles, cardboard boxes, and paper across the ocean, according to an article in the Wall Street Journal. A separate article in the journal reports that companies seeking to cut plastic use are tapping a vast source of raw materials, ocean garbage. So today we're looking at all things recycling, and the reason you care is pretty straightforward. At least 10 states have passed or enacted legislation this year concerning recycling management. That is on top of another 200 bills introduced this year alone, that's 2019, aimed at reducing single-use plastics. So there's all this legislation out there. So even if you don't care about the environment, you better care because there's all this new legislation coming down the pike that we'll see enacted in the next few years that will drastically change large portions of the consumer market in terms of packaging materials and containers and so forth. So a lot of different ways you could care. We've got a lot to break down today to understand this new problem and the old problem. But of course, we couldn't begin this critical conversation without
your friendly redneck liberal, Lance Jackson.
Says it's right there, redneck liberal. I like recycling. Been doing it my whole life since I was a little kid.
Okay.
Used to deliver newspapers and then go pick them up and take them down to South Parsons Avenue in Columbus and get $1 a ton for them. And mom and dad stay swing. So I gave them to people. Then I went and got them.
Well, you got paid to give them to people.
Yep.
So
made money on both ends.
Okay, right.
Yeah, I like that recycling thing. Mm-hmm. Plus, I'm real excited today.
Why is that?
Because our producer, Bradley, is going to get to be on the show as one of the cohorts.
Uh-oh. Yep. Keeping on the pressure.
I am.
There's big expectations.
I'm excited. Oh, it's great to bring in new young talent.
Yes. Well, we will hear from Bradley in the second segment of our program today. He's going to share with us some about how fast fashion is coming into play in the recycling world.
And he is a fashionista, so
yes, he is.
It's well put together there.
We almost thought it through. Might be inadvertently accused of that. So we're going to first look at, because there's a problem nationwide, but one good example, one place to look is California has been hit particularly hard. The state's largest recycling center shut down in September of 2019, and about 2/3 of Californians' recyclables exported abroad went to China before the restrictions took place. Now, state lawmakers are trying to push through proposals during the last weeks of the legislative session. 2 new sweeping bills in the state Senate and Assembly aim to reduce, reuse, or recycle 75% of single-use plastics in the state by 2030. Now, you compare that to what we know right now, which is how plastic was produced globally in 2016 was disposed of. Only 9% was recycled globally. And what California is looking to do is recycle 75%. Very aggressive.
Getting after it. Yep.
But then as we look at the nation, Lance, and here's where I think things come into focus for us. In 2017, the United States exported about 14.5 million metric tons of scrap recyclables to China, according to the Institute for Scrap Recycling Industries. That dropped to around 9.4 million metric tons. So it was 14.5 down to 9.4 million metric tons in 2018. So in 1 year. Since China implemented its new policy at the start of 2018, U.S. states and cities have felt the brunt of falling prices on certain recyclables. For example, the average price for mixed paper in the U.S., so this is like at work, if you've got a recycling bin where you throw all your papers, if you got newspapers, they go in there, your everyday office paper, that type of stuff. That mixed use paper was priced in August of 2017 at $67. Now it's dropped to -$2 in August of 2019.
Is that per ton?
Yes.
To not cost you money.
Right.
To recycle it.
It costs you money to recycle the paper. And so, and that kind
Which is why it's leading to problems.
Exactly. Frames the whole conversation that we're talking about today is before it was beneficial for most places to recycle because in some cases you could actually make money recycling. Now it's the opposite. Now you're in most cases paying to recycle. And in some ways, to almost make matters worse, some states are going so far as to charge companies who don't recycle a certain amount of product for the cost of disposal of the product in a non-recyclable way. So you're either going to have to pay to recycle or pay to dispose of in a way that isn't recyclable.
Well, if nobody's going to buy it to recycle it, then it has to go into the landfill. So you can still force people to recycle, but they're recycling thinking they're doing something good for the environment, and it's just going to go into the landfill. Or like I saw this morning on the news here locally, there was a gentleman who was just put in jail on 5 counts of illegally disposing of recyclable materials. He was dumping it without a permit all over the place because he had to get rid of it, and he couldn't afford to pay the prices at the landfill that they were charging him, but he was charging his customers to still collect it. So he had to illegally dump it in order to try to make money, and they caught him. And so, here are all these people that are recycling that thinking they're doing something good for the environment, and it just ends up in illegal places anyway.
Allie Kingfisher, who's the statewide recycling coordinator at Washington's Department of Ecology, says, quote, "We're very good at collecting materials, but not very good at using those materials." And part of that comes into play, as highlighted earlier. America used to export most of its recyclables to China, and they processed it. Part of what happened recently, for those that don't know the backstory, is China didn't say this, but as a retaliation to the trade war, they greatly upped the amount of, they greatly downgraded the amount of tolerance they have for contaminated product. And what we mean by that is when there's food waste or product that's badly damaged that can't easily be recycled, those types of things, or just trash that get things that aren't recyclable that get thrown in with recyclables, all of that counts as contamination. And if a batch has a certain percentage of contamination, then the whole thing gets thrown away. And so not only is there a problem there with you throw away all this good recyclable stuff, but on top of that, we have America, more so than other countries, has particularly high rates of recyclable contamination because as a country, we're not evidently all that familiar with proper recycling. So, and therefore China used that as a justification to say, instead of accepting, I don't remember what the rate was. We looked at this.
I don't either, but it was
6 months back or something.
But on their part, I know China kind of is getting a bad rap right now, whether rightfully so or not, but it makes sense on their part to do this. They don't want to take our trash. They want to take our recyclables. They're well within their rights to say, you guys need to clean up your recyclables and not send us your trash. I mean, I see their point.
Yeah.
Whether it's legitimate or not, or whether it's in reaction to the trade wars, it still makes sense. It's like, okay, people, it's not that hard to clean your recyclables and know what you can recycle and what you can't, and quit trying to just throw stuff away because you think it's getting out of your house and it's going to do something good.
Well, in that same vein, it's pretty interesting because we talk about on this show all the time, right? Education, Lance. And in fact, speaking of education, as a network, right, TrueChat pursues this common goal on all of our programs. And what is that goal that we pursue?
We pursue a common goal?
Yes.
I don't know. It's not to educate people by providing honest, open, and respectful conversations, is it?
It is.
Is that our common goal now?
It is.
Oh, wow. I thought that was our mission statement.
Well, and the reason I bring that up is because part of this is people just don't know, right? I mean, they look at something like a plastic bag and they say, well, plastic's recyclable. So they throw it into their mixed recycling bin that the city picks up, for example.
Exactly.
Without realizing that actually counts as a contaminant because it's not accepted in that mixed recycling.
Right.
So it's actually better for you to either recycle it in the proper place or throw it away if you're not going to do that, because putting it in the recycling actually risks losing all the recycling.
All the good recycling that you put in there. And
so what's happened is in places like Massachusetts, awareness campaigns have helped decrease non-compliant recycling by anywhere from 30% to 80%. That's why I brought up the education thing. Awareness, right?
Sure.
If you tell people that you can't recycle this thing, not everybody's going to listen, but most people will just try to do the right thing. And
like we always said, most people follow the laws most of the time.
Right. So Massachusetts has provided close to $1 million in grants to 28 communities in the state since 2017 to improve local recycling programs, and last year launched its statewide education initiative. So this is one way a state's kind of approaching it different. A lot of states are banning particular things. Massachusetts is taking more of the approach of educating people about what is and isn't recyclable. And that's kind of a different take. And we'll talk more about that in the...
And that makes sense because that's where public education took root, and Horace Mann and all of his...
So you're a fan of Massachusetts.
When it comes to leading the way in social issues and education, yes.
Okay.
They've always been one of the leaders in the country.
So next we've got to talk about, Lance, big ocean companies who are looking to big companies that are looking to salvage ocean trash, not big ocean companies. Sorry. But that's what we're going to look at next. This is a different approach. When we're talking about household products for the most part so far. Now we're looking at, we got all this junk in the ocean.
Right.
And maybe we can clean it up. So there's plenty more to come on The State of Us. Keep it right here, and we'll be right back.
We are The State of Us. Here's your host, Justin T. Weller.
Companies seeking to cut plastic use are tapping a vast source of raw materials, ocean garbage. And this is where Lance comes into play. We thought we'd give him the garbage one. And tell us a little bit, Lance, what are these companies trying to do here exactly?
Well, there are all kinds of materials that are making their way into our ocean water.
And this is bad, right?
Well, most people would think so, yes.
Okay.
I don't want to speak for everyone, but I think most of us
it kills marine life, which in turn has effect on seafood pricing in communities that are dependent on this, impacts global warming. So
that is true. Coca-Cola Company recently unveiled a bottle made in part of recycled marine litter. Interface Inc., the world's biggest maker of carpet tiles, is weaving rugs with yarns produced from discarded fishing nets. Startups are raising funds to fish for plastics. I like that pun. They're fishing for plastics and to make new products. So companies are trying to do some things with this, okay? And the reason why is because each year there are roughly 8 million tons of plastics that leak into the ocean, the equivalent of a garbage truck's worth of trash each minute of every day. Because of the poor lack of waste management system. That amounts to about $10 billion worth of packaging materials based on market prices. So you say, well, is this a problem? It sure does seem like it, right? With that much garbage going into the oceans that we have, fish and ocean liners and everything else. And the reason for this is because we're using so much more plastic. Not that it takes, a genius to figure that out, but in millions of metric tons, it took us to probably from 1950 when plastic was introduced to 1960 to get up to about 10 million metric tons. And currently we now are producing as a world about 381 million metric tons of plastic garbage. It's a lot of plastic.
It's a lot of plastic.
I mean, kind of like what you said, though, we're looking at how to recycle all of this stuff. Why don't we find things that don't have to be recycled? And then we can multiple use?
Right.
So that's kind of the third segment, but at the same time.
Well, part of what we haven't mentioned a lot yet, Lance, and I was reading this the other day in regards to recycling, a lot of people don't understand that usually plastic is only recyclable once, if even that.
Right.
Plastic is not, of the things that can be recycled, it's not one of the easier items to recycle and continue to recycle. On the contrary, though, things like aluminum cans, Lance, most aluminum cans, if disposed of properly, are 100% recyclable. In other words, you can take one aluminum can and turn it into an aluminum can again because they melt down the aluminum, sanitize it, and then they punch it back out into another aluminum can. So it's not quite perfect because, there's loss and so forth in the disposal, but it is much more recyclable aluminum per se than plastic is. And a lot of people don't understand. Great, we recycled it once, but part of the thing that concerns me about all this recycling talk about plastic is, okay, now we've recycled it once, but then we're just going to throw it away.
Well, and that's what Kevin Stairs, the chemical and pollution expert at Greenpeace, says. We're never going to recycle our way out of this plastic crisis. Recycling makes people think there's a solution, but he added, that's simply not the case. So there's somebody right up your alley there, right? Who's telling the same thing. But just because it's a chart, and I'm not sure you looked at it.
Oh,
who do you think the biggest ocean polluter is in the world?
Ooh.
Where does most of that
I would
381 million
I
metric
would guess
tons,
the United States or China. But is that right?
that's the top two.
Okay.
and by a large margin, all right, by more than 3 times.
Nobody's
more
even
than
close.
anybody else. Well, there is one that is within 30% of us,
Who's that?
of the U.S. and China. India.
Yeah.
But they are the only ones that are.
Well, they're dealing with a lot of problems. I
right.
mean, electric grid issues, internet, computer, they're growing massively, and that lends itself to lots of waste.
So we know it's going up, and we know a lot of it's going into the oceans. The Ocean Cleanup, a nonprofit, raised $22 million to launch an autonomous floating trash collector in the Pacific in September of 2018, but it collapsed in December.
Oh.
The founder of the company said recently, we are working on a sturdier version, but said more development is needed to make the project economically sustainable. So again, it's got people's attention. They're trying to do things about it. They're, again, education. We're trying to find ways to do it. But they have found out there's a better way to do this than to wait until it gets into the ocean. Can you guess what that might be? Other than
Tell me,
not
Lance.
making it.
What is it?
You can't guess? Catch it on the coast. Because now it's not out in the water as often or as long.
Because a lot of it returns to land.
Right. And the longer it stays in the salt water, the more it deteriorates, making it tougher to recycle. So a couple companies have Dell Technologies in 2017 recycled 27 metric tons of ocean-bound plastic collected within roughly 30 miles of coastlines or waterways. Dell reuses the material for packaging, and it's expanding in its initiative. HP Incorporated said it sourced 450 metric tons of trash at risk of reaching the sea in Haiti, equivalent to 35 million plastic bottles, to make ink cartridges and laptop and monitor parts. So they're adding that, collecting plastic waste from beaches is a more reliable option. You can find it easier. It's stronger. It hasn't deteriorated, which then makes it easier to use in those in recycling efforts. So it's kind of an interesting way. So you stop it before it gets there. So yes, we need to drop the number of plastic items that we produce, but at the same time, we're finding out that, well, the earlier we can catch it, the better, the more uses it has, and the more we can save it from getting it, and the less harm it does to the environment.
So, question, can you tell us the order in which the countries rank in terms of the worst polluters, ocean polluters?
It's the United States and China way up there.
How is this ranked? Is it by like metric tons or?
Largest,
what's our
largest polluters by percentage of total municipal plastic waste?
Okay.
Okay. So it's about, out of 188 countries, the United States is at about 16 metric tons. China is at 14. India is at 10. And then we drop all the way down to Brazil at 5. Indonesia at 4. The Philippines at 4. Germany 3. Italy 3. Japan. Here's 2. Russia 2.
So here's the thing though, Lance, right? It sounds like, well, we're just neck and neck here with China and India.
I shouldn't say that. That's not metric tons. That's percentage of waste.
Right.
So we're at about 16% of all the waste.
It sounds like
so China, us, and India make up about 40% of the waste.
But the real kicker, though, let's not forget this, right? The United States is a nation of about 326 million people. Okay. By contrast, India is a nation of about 1.39 billion people, and China 1.39 billion people. So, I mean,
we're producing more with less.
Right.
We always do that. We're great at that.
Oh.
Even with good stuff.
But I mean, it's not even close. I mean, if we took that into account, right, our share per person is terrible. I mean, atrocious.
That's how we're keeping America great, dude. Is we produce more trash than everybody else.
Jiminy. I mean, we're, they have
You're not going to let me read again, are you? Because I
four
start
times
making those
the
political
population.
statements. I know. We do. I mean, it's the same thing when we talk about looking around the world and saying we have to cut emissions.
Right.
And, everybody in the world needs to cut emissions, and we're the biggest offenders.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
because, and we have the fewest people.
But speaking of a way that things, I mean, we talked about ocean trash, right? And this is a way Massachusetts is doing some education. But now we've got a very, I think, unique and different way. And that's where our producer, Bradley Butch, comes into play to tell us about
This is
fast
my big
fashion.
debut, huh?
Your big debut.
You're on.
It's very appropriate though, right? I mean,
He is
Yeah.
the fashionista.
Yeah.
I mean, he quickly passed you. I mean, you were head and shoulders above
okay.
Lance said it, not me.
the two of us. But
Lance,
Bradley comes in
you
pretty
didn't say
dapper.
that you didn't agree though. So
Bradley comes in pretty dapper every day.
I'm not going to say anything. I just let Lance my spokesperson right now.
I'm a good negotiator. Stay with me, son. I'll get you a lot of zeros.
Yeah, so I found this article particularly interesting because I happen to be a fairly regular customer at a lot of these retailers. So the problem essentially is that these retailers are producing more and more clothing to keep up with trends and to make them cheaper.
what types of retailers are we talking about?
Retailers like H&M and Zara are the two biggest, I would say.
You shop there a lot, Lance?
All the time.
Okay.
I get all my white shirts from there.
H&M and Zara?
No,
Okay.
I do know.
Have you ever been in either of those stores?
I have not.
Okay.
I've heard of H&M.
Yeah.
Didn't even know what a Zara was,
Okay.
but have never been in either one of those humble abodes.
Sorry, Bradley. Go ahead.
Essentially, the problem is that people are buying 63% more clothes and discarding them 37% faster. So as a result of this, textiles and landfills have jumped 68% from 2000 to 2015.
I don't understand that.
They're buying clothes 63% faster.
I get it. I know. I get it. But I'm like, I don't buy clothes. I hate buying clothes. I never get rid of clothes, and I don't buy any new clothes.
But you're
Why are you guys so? What is this?
But you're the friendly redneck liberal.
What's this? What's the problem that you guys have with new clothes?
My 2 cents is because they're getting cheaper and they want to pump them out faster, the quality is also deteriorating with that. And also, a lot of these fast fashion retailers, a lot of it, they carry a lot of trendy items, so they come in and out. And people don't want the last season per se.
Wow. But see, a good solid white collared shirt and a bow tie with a sweater vest, it just blows fashion out of the water. I mean,
I can't disagree.
And it's there all the time.
Yeah, I cannot disagree with you.
It doesn't matter what the trend is. I look good.
My personal experience with these, I don't usually go for the trendy items. They sell a lot of like basic,
just good
options.
Solid things that you can mix and match and do different things. And it's affordable, which is, you and I were talking off air, how for young people, that's a very important thing.
Yes.
You want to look good, but we have already talked on multiple shows how young people aren't making as much money as they were in my day. And so you can look good at a cheaper price.
So is the main thing they're doing reselling clothes?
Yeah. So, a solution that a lot of people would jump to is, well, why don't we just recycle these clothes that are being thrown in the landfills and make new clothes? Well, we can't do that because less than 1% of the fibers from recycled clothes can be used to make new clothes because they're so hard to separate. So what a lot of big retailers are resorting to is using secondhand bins and selling secondhand clothing.
And that seems to be a big market. I mean, I watch, when I watch the TV, I don't stream and everything, so I watch the commercials and all that kind of stuff. It seems like that's another trend among the younger generation.
There's new businesses, but that's their market. The only thing they do is sell repurposed items.
I mean, there's like $200. I can't imagine it. Even my wife, who's the shoe maven, $200 pair of shoes. And look, I got them for $35, or this is a $500 suit from some market and I got it for, $27. And so that's kind of what you're talking about there.
Yeah. And, going back to the recycling, as of right now, it's too hard to separate fibers to actually repurpose them for new clothing. So some new tech that's in development is actually technology that can separate fibers more easily so we can actually repurpose those clothing.
You could actually take some old garment and
repurpose it into a new piece of clothing.
And that to me, not that I'm down on the secondhand thing. I've just honestly, I will admit that is an area that I have like zero familiarity with. Just never have. I don't know why.
You never shopped at Goodwill or anything?
No.
Why not? There's some good buys there.
Well, we can see that Americans are more and more willing to buy secondhand items, and that's a growing market. Mm-hmm. But yes, I do understand it's still very marginal compared to people who want to buy new.
But I think that part of what comes back to mind, though, with the recycling thing, is like great, we do this secondhand thing, but at some point, a garment wears to a point of it's no longer
viable.
Right. It's no longer viable. I mean, it's no longer reasonable. And so it'd be nice if there was a way, because sometimes like when a garment, you know, like if a sleeve, for example, gets ripped off or something, okay, and now it's decided, well, this isn't really something you're going to fix. It's, you know, it's beyond salvage. Now you can actually do something to make use of the fabric that's left.
I don't get this because Mrs. Jackson has to throw my clothes away before when I'm not home, because it's like, where's my favorite shirt? It's happened like 3 times in our marriage. Well, I threw it away. It had holes in it. I always wore something over it. You didn't know it was holes in it. That was my favorite shirt. I don't understand getting rid of clothes.
I hear you. Okay, so we're going to talk about, we've looked at a few solutions so far, but what's next? What's to come in this world of recycling?
So stay with us, and we're going to figure out what's going to happen next in the recycling world of oceans, clothes, and trash.
We are The State of Us. Here's your host, Justin T. Weller.
States and the United States are looking to do a better job of recycling, particularly in the wake of new heated tensions with China in regards to recycling. They've quit accepting quite the same level of contaminated product as they were accepting before. This has caused vast ripples through the U.S. and has taken things like mixed paper from being valued at $67 all the way to negative $2 in the matter of basically 2 years' time. So it's kind of upended all this, and now we're looking at new domestic ways and other ways to both recycle better, but also go salvage things that previously really wasn't happening. And Lance and Bradley took us through. Lance shared with us kind of the ocean trash, right? Mm-hmm. Going out there and getting that, and the beach trash. I mean, we didn't spend quite as much time on that, but collecting things on the shorelines. And Bradley talked to us about reusing clothes. Not something you always think. I mean, when you think recycling, clothes is not usually one of those things that comes immediately to people's minds. But as Bradley told us, people are buying clothes 63% faster and getting rid of them 37% faster. So it's obviously contributing to all of this and something that we should be thinking about as well. And on that clothing note, I just wanted to take a moment because this is an opportunity for me to talk about my shoes, recycling, sustainability.
Oh, make yourself sound good.
Yeah.
To the East Coast liberals.
Well, so this is not sponsored by any means, but I did want to share, and there's lots of companies like this. This is just the one I'm familiar with. Its name is Allbirds, and that's ALLBIRDS, Allbirds. I don't know why.
Because they don't have any animals. They're just birds.
Right. But they make a number of different products. Primarily shoes is what they're known for. And that's what I'm wearing today. The main body of the shoe is made of merino wool, which sounds like not something that you would want in your shoe. But I think a lot of people forget wool is a pretty versatile product. It is breathable, but also warm.
We doing an infomercial now?
Well, the reason I'm bringing this up is because it's an example of a product that's combining multiple fronts. The laces are made of recycled plastic, okay, that can't be turned back into like a bottle per se. And almost no plastic can be. That's something I wanted to mention before. A lot of people think, you know, I recycle this plastic bottle, it's going to go be a plastic bottle. Very rarely is that the case. Most recycled plastic can't meet the food grade standard to go back to being something that contains liquid or food. So this is one way that they repurpose that into something in a totally different product. But the body of the shoe itself is made from sustainable materials like wool, which is, of course, biodegradable, trees, sugar, and trino. So trino is actually a new proprietary yarn that is made from trees and wool together. They actually strip trees down to like a fiber-like level and combine it, I don't know how, but with wool. And since you can grow trees and you can shear sheep, you know, these are products that don't take the same type of non-renewable sources that most shoes take to make. They're not quite at the price point, I think, that they need to be at yet for most people to, I don't know, how much do you spend on shoes?
Too much.
Well, but if you could spend the same amount.
Okay, I got you though. Okay.
Yeah.
I understand what you're saying, but the bottom line is, as the articles say, And I recycle. Don't get me wrong. I'm a big believer. I recycle. Like I said, started the show. I've been recycling since, I was 12 years old. So almost 50 years, 45 years. The problem is recycling is not going to stop the problem. This isn't going to save the planet.
No.
I mean, the bottom line, we're selling everybody a false hope. I mean, it's better to recycle than not, but it's not.
Well, it's not the end all be all.
But it's not the solution to the problem.
No.
And our show always deals with the solution. And I just want to make sure that we understand that recycling is good. Okay. But it's not the solution to stop this. We need to hang on to things longer. We need to quit being a disposable society. And that might mean paying a little bit more for products.
And I think the other thing that,
it's a sin that it's cheaper for me to throw something away and go buy a new one than it is to have that one worked on.
well, particularly because,
I pay to have my electronics. I don't know what they do with it, but I go up to the local county and pay for them to take my recyclable electronics that I can buy a new one cheaper than I can repair the old one.
yes,
And that's sad because
It
I
is.
come from a day when if your TV went on the blink or your refrigerator went on the blink or whatever, you called a repairman and they fixed it. Well, now it's almost impossible to do those kinds of things because, this cost, the motherboard went out and da-da-da-da. So it's going to cost this you can buy a new one cheaper. So you just get rid of this one. See, that's where sometimes you wonder where I have my issues with technology.
I'm not sure and that's where we have to, and this is the big challenge with all of this is because recycling isn't the end all be all, at least not yet. And that's part of the other key.
Let's say yet.
Recycling hasn't changed all that much. That's just the reality. Yes, there's some new things that have come out, but for the most part, from when you were recycling to now, there's not that big of a difference in how we recycle.
Right.
There hasn't been a lot of innovation. And I guess my point there is recycling can't in its current form fix the problem.
Okay.
But if we invest more in figuring out how to do a better job of recycling more products, like, for example, clothes, I think that's a huge one. Everybody in the world pretty much wears some sort of garments, and making better use of those.
Maybe that's a show.
What?
Naked and Afraid.
Naked and Afraid?
Save the planet.
That is a show.
I know, but we could do it. Save the planet.
Okay.
If everybody were nudist,
it would save a lot of.
We wouldn't have all these clothes to recycle.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that is a potential.
I'm looking for solutions.
Solution.
I'm looking for solutions
all
here.
Right. I'm not sure that one will fly, but
okay.
Maybe in the tropical areas, perhaps might get a bit chipper in Ohio in the middle of winter, but
not if global warming takes place.
Well,
we'll be in that temperate zone.
But if we do this, it'll be fixed. So,
okay.
Right? No, that's not how it'll work. But it would, I'm sure it would help. Probably not the most practical option. So I do think we have to invest.
You just have to buy winter clothes. You would have to buy summer clothes and spring clothes and fall clothes.
We have to invest in you start the nonprofit, Lance, and get her going, the movement to become a nudist society. You'd definitely get some diehard support right away, probably for not the right reasons, but hey, they'd be there. All the nudists they'd be on board. The thinking is if we invest more in recycling and the other side of this, come up with ways, I agree, to make products last longer, I think is important. I'm not sure though, and this is part of the problem, just the way that things like computers are manufactured today, the feasibility of making them more serviceable and repairable, again, as it currently stands, just probably isn't practical. Doesn't mean it can't be done, but it means we really have to innovate. In part because so much of this stuff is so tiny and is assembled by machines anyway, that the possibility of a human servicing it in some cases just isn't possible. Because the level of precision or the way something is machined, prevents it. But much like recycling, I don't think that means that we should give up on that prospect, but it will require, right now, I think we don't have enough innovation in this whole area. We're just trying to do things the way we did 50 years ago. And 50 years ago, we weren't recycling to save the planet. We were doing it because it was cheaper to recycle most things than it was to get new ones.
I agree. I know you just.
It's
always like we're going to go. where innovation and technology will save the world. And I'm not convinced that that's the case, but I guess it's our only hope.
I'm just not sure, you're not going to stop making computers thin and small. Probably not realistically.
Well, but you asked me to do other things that inconvenience me to save the planet. So why not make technology to where it can be repaired and make it bigger and bulkier? Again, I'm just talking about the concept.
I know what you mean.
When we ask other people to, well, step up and do this, and yes, it's an inconvenience, and yes, it'd be easier for you to do this, but we need to all save the planet. I'm just throwing that out there. I agree with you that nobody's going to want to do it, and it's going to be difficult to do. It's just something that I've seen that's changed in my lifetime.
Technology also used to be more upgradable. And I think that this is another problem with it. It's not just right that technology quits working, it's that it becomes obsolete.
Right.
And there's no way,
well, it's like
in a lot of cases, you just can't do
like Bradley
anything.
said with fashions. Fashions are changing so quickly that people want more clothes to stay fashionable, but therefore then the people who make the clothes, the designers, make them more cheaply because they know they're not going to be worn as long. Bradley's point was well taken, that the clothes aren't made with the same quality because there's not this, a black tux looks good no matter what day and age you're in.
Right.
Well,
there's not as many people that wear that type of stuff.
But that's the problem, is we're going to be trendy. We don't have timeless fashions.
There's a lot of places to look at, that's for sure, because I think part of what's cool about our episode today, as we highlighted, it goes all over the place, right? We say recyclables, and what everybody thinks about today are like plastic bottles and cans and paper, right? And yes, you should think about that, but there's this whole other world that we have to start looking at, and we just can't look at ocean trash and assume that recycling is the answer. We can't just look at fashion and assume that recycling is the answer. We also have to look beyond recycling, make products that last longer, and hopefully that are reusable for longer periods of time as well. Lance, we've challenged people to tune in this year, yes? Mm-hmm. To bring other people to the program. So you're listening.
And the year's almost up.
So you got to get on it.
We're going to have to find a new challenge next year.
I know. I don't know what it's going to be. But if you're going to invite somebody to listen to this program, there's a number of different ways they can tune in. What are those?
Well, you got Apple Podcasts, you've got Stitcher, and my personal favorite, Spotify, and anywhere else you find that you like to listen to podcasts.
If you want to check out today's articles, thestateofus.org, we've got them linked there. That's one of the new features we rolled out this year. So please take a gander. For The State of Us on TrueChat in Urbana, Ohio, I'm Justin T. Weller.
And I'm Lance Jackson.
And a special thanks to Bradley Butsch, our producer, for being on the show today, providing that invaluable insight into fast fashion. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Be the change.